Good day. Jack Hades here from the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. This is just a quick announcement to advise that in the interest of bringing an element of class to this show, I have been taking vocal training and will be affecting a more posh and regal accent from this point forward. Unfortunately, everything else about this show will remain the same. Love ya. On this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley discusses mental health and is joined by special guest Crusty Pete from the Pete Being Pete and Old Men Howling at the Moon podcast. You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to passing on knowledge and experience from a satanic perspective, hosted by Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley.
Greetings and welcome to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about a really interesting subject, that of mental health. I'm very fortunate to be joined by the host of multiple podcasts, those being Pete Being Pete and Two Old Men Howling at the Moon, to discuss his own issues with mental health and the stigma associated with it. I myself have my own take on mental health and mental illness. As a Gen Xer, I grew up in a time where mental health wasn't yet a thing. We had other words for it, or for people who suffered from mental illness. More on that in today's essay, but needless to say, if one were to bring any of those terms back, the swift hammer of cancel culture would fall in a hurry. I'm going to note here and later on in the essay that I do not speak for my generation as a whole. I've had my peers agree with my opinion, so it seems that a majority of us were brought up the same way. We grew up with an existing stigma about mental health. It really wasn't looked at in the same way as it is today. People with mental health issues were crazy. People with depression just needed to straighten out. In fact, if you had anything wrong with you at all, you kept it to yourself lest you be discovered by your peers. The funny thing I find with the whole mental health awareness movement is that once we as Gen X realized it was okay to admit we had issues, it was very freeing. We were finally able to name the feelings and issues we had without fear of repercussion. And not to mention, I myself am not beyond taking the odd mental health day off work for when I really need a break. In no way does this mean I take advantage of any work policies. It's just now we can do these things and it is good for our mental health. If you're able to do so, I would encourage you to do that for yourself once in a while. I'll expand on my thoughts and experience in a greater detail in the essay for today's show titled, Tech Yourself Before You Wreck Yourself. My relationship and journey with mental health. Note, I really lay it all out here. I'm only speaking for myself in the era or time in which I grew up. I don't speak for all of Gen X. I can't help if anyone's offended by this essay. This is my life and my truth. If you're experiencing any mental health issues, please refer to your doctor or mental health professional. Mental health, the latest buzzword to excuse abnormal behavior or a real condition affecting millions of people across the planet. Wow, nothing like throwing a lit stick of dynamite to start an essay, am I right? Talk about the use of trigger words. Before you scroll past this post or turn off this podcast, what have you, give me a minute to explain. I don't think I'm alone in this, especially when it comes to some people in my generation. I have to say that as a somewhat ignorant Gen Xer, my thoughts on this topic have changed a lot over the years. I'm by no means an expert on mental health, or in anything really, but I've had experience on both sides of the fence on this one. On the one side, I had opinions derived from growing up in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, I'm that old. And on the other side, I experienced my own issues. If I break it down to each side of the fence, you'll see what I mean. I grew up in an era where mental health wasn't really a thing yet, at least not in terms of giving it a name. The addressing of any mental health issues was described largely with pejoratives. People were crazy, nuts, Looney Tunes, the list goes on. Crazy people went to the Coconut Palace or were locked up in the loony bin. This was the established vernacular around which I was raised. Nobody saw it as wrong or inappropriate at the time. That's just the way it was. In school, kids with learning disabilities were designated as special needs kids and taken out of normal classes to be put with a resource teacher in the rubber room. Even in high school, I was a good student. However, I was not good at math, and am still not good at math, but I digress. I couldn't take the same level of math as my peers, so I took a lower level of math with less difficult concepts. The math course I took? Why, rubber math, of course. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I wasn't responsible for coining all these phrases and attitudes. Obviously, attitudes toward mental health were far different then than those of today. I'm just reiterating how it was, at least where I grew up. As I got older, mental health was dismissed as weakness. Allow me to regale you with the songs of my teenage years, a list of top 40 hits, including but not limited to these greats. Get your head out of your ass and get over yourself. Just put on your big boy pants and deal with it. All you need to do is stop being depressed. It's that simple. Depressed? No, you're not. That's just stupid. Man up. And many more. Quite the playlist, don't you think? So, armed with the ignorance of societal attitudes towards mental health, off I ventured into adulthood. I had no reason to change any of my attitudes towards mental health. After all, we're largely a product of our upbringing, right? But society and its attitude towards this issue was rapidly changing around me. Special needs kids were now diagnosed with some form of autism or ADHD and given the attention they needed to develop. Teachers began to recognize that there are different aptitudes and learning styles and began to adapt their teaching approach. The pejorative shell shock as applied to veterans was dropped. Post traumatic stress disorder became a more accurate term for the condition. And, being the dumb shit that I was, I still carried my learned behaviors. Oh, now they're giving everything a name. Nice. Or, what kid isn't on the spectrum these days? And other ignorant comments like that. Of course, these opinions had to be expressed in private company, but the funny thing is, most of my Gen X contemporaries were in the same boat I was. They didn't understand it either. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. I simply categorized myself as a self appointed grumpy old man who didn't have to accept the new way of looking at mental health. They all just had to get over it. And then it can happen to you. I'd always been an angry person, quick tempered, quick to fly off the handle, very little patience. I never really thought anything of it. In my youth, I had been a bodybuilder and a power lifter and had always had very high testosterone levels, not from steroids, I was all natural. High levels of testosterone can make one aggressive, so I just attributed my own aggression to that. However, once I hit my late 40s, I seemed to be really angry all the time, especially in traffic. I got to the point where I actually bought a bat and sawed it down and kept it in my car. My anger was affecting my work life, my social life, and my home life. I also had days where I felt like I was under a really dark cloud or at the bottom of a deep well. Those were days I described as feeling really dark inside. Of course, given the background in which I grew up, where we dismiss mental health as weakness, I never once thought there could be any issue with me. I figured all I needed to do was not be so angry or depressed all the time. I tried everything: mindfulness, deep breathing, meditation, counseling. Nothing worked. What did finally work to get me to acknowledge my issues? My wife, Ms. Wiz, really is a saint. She has definitely put up with a lot for me over our years together. But this was one thing she simply couldn't stand for. She came to me with an ultimatum: get some help, or we're going to have to talk about our future. Talk about a bucket of cold water. I love my wife more than any single person on this planet, and there was no way I was going to let that happen. So I booked a doctor's appointment and completely broke down in the office. As it turns out, I have low levels of serotonin. Serotonin is one of the natural body chemicals that controls your mood. Since I didn't have very much, that explained my anger and low points. My doctor prescribed a serotonin booster, and things have definitely improved. And no divorce. Sorry, ladies, this guy's taken. For the record, my old attitude did sneak in, and I tried to take myself off the medication on my own. Don't. Just don't. Work with your doctor. Once I discovered and began to study Satanism, it became all the more evident to me that one needs a clear head to do the work necessary to learn and understand. Constant anger will cloud your mind as well as your judgment. One cannot effect lesser magic unless one is able to focus and concentrate. Is my attitude the same as it was growing up? Not even close. My own experience with mental health showed me that this is indeed a thing. My study of Satanism taught me to slow down and focus my energy and efforts on my is to be as opposed to being mired down by my shadow self. We make our own lives, and there's nothing wrong with getting a little help if you need it. I know how lucky I am, given that there are people out there with far worse conditions than mine. But now, given my own experience and awareness of mental health, I would never see it as a weakness. I give mental health the respect and attention it deserves and realize that it forms a huge part of all people. This is my story. Perhaps yours is similar, perhaps totally different. But perhaps by sharing my previous attitudes, experience, and consequent shift to my views, it might help you to relate to someone in your life, especially for a generation which did not put an emphasis on mental health, with a bit more understanding. Ever forward. This is a good time for a break. When we come back, we welcome Crusty Pete, the host of Pete Being Pete and Two Old Men Howling at the Moon, to discuss more about mental health.
You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For comments, questions, or suggestions, email us at neutralwisdom.ca.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
And welcome back to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. And I'd like to welcome our special guest today. He's the host of two popular podcasts, Pete Being Pete and Two Old Men Howling at the Moon, which is one of my personal favorites. He's the lead vocalist for a couple of death metal bands, Rupture and Arcturus, and Model Chaos, and happens to be a crusty old Gen Xer just like me. Welcome, Crusty Pete. Welcome to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, man. Great to have you here.
Thanks. I truly appreciate being on. I love what you do. I'm ready to talk everything and anything. Let's go on this wonderful Sunday. I don't know when you release this, but hey, it's Sunday right now, so let's do this.
And after listening to your podcast, we could be doing this for quite a while, so that's actually not a bad thing. I gotta say, like we were talking about before we came on, personally not a big into the death metal thing, but Model Chaos, what is with that band? I love it. It's ambient. The instrumentation is amazing. It's so different from the other stuff you're doing where it sounds like you're gargling razor blades. So where did you come from? Where does this Model Chaos thing come from?
Model Chaos just kind of happened to show up. I'd been out of the death metal scene for a long time. I mean, almost going on almost 17, 18 years when I kind of stumbled into Model Chaos and they were forming. And it was me and two guys, Kevin and Stefan. And yeah, it just kind of happened. And the funny thing is, I used to be known, and I guess I kind of still am in some circles, as being a death metal singer, but actually that's my least favorite form of music to sing. I guess I really prefer to actually use my voice and, not toot my own horn, but I'm a pretty versatile singer. So, so basically ended up falling into this gothic electro kind of band, and it got signed to Dancer Macabre Records, which, if anyone's into the gothic scene, is Das Ich from over here. It's Bruno's band label. And we did some stuff. I recorded the first album, vocals, and wrote all the lyrics. We did a little bit of touring, and then kind of segues into everything. Mental health kind of showed up in my life, and it just kind of made it impossible for me to tour or get out there and do shows and feel comfortable about things. And so I kind of put that away. But yeah, I mean, when people always ask me for, hey, what have you done in your life? Model Chaos is always one of those albums. That album, the album's called Ghost Market. They have other albums. That's not me singing. But Ghost Market, the first album, that's all me. And it's always one of my crowning achievements, I guess, in life, because I love it. I love the way the album came out. I love the sounds. I think it was the perfect time for me to be doing something like that. So yeah, that's kind of how that all happened.
It's definitely not what I was expecting after I listened to the first couple bands that you sent me links to, and definitely something to check out. And I'm really looking forward to talking about mental health and your personal issues and how you've dealt with mental health. But before we jump into all that, you know what kind of podcast this is. right? So,
Yes.
but you're the first guest I've really had on the show who's not a Satanist. So I would love if you could tell us a little bit about you and your background, where you come from, whatever you think we would need to know to give us some context as to the weird shit we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, I mean, as everyone knows, well, as you know now, apparently, now listening to this, I do a podcast with David Ingram, who also is, very out about his, being a Satanist. For me, I grew up in a family that was very non-religious. And my mother was always one of those people that said, look, I'm not going to stick anything on you. You're not going to be baptized. When you get older, find what fits for you best. And for me, always, I've just been one of those people that's like, look, everybody does their own thing, as long as you're not eating babies or doing horrible things to people and not trying to shove stuff on me, I'm open for everybody doing everything. On my personal side, I lean kind of towards the science side of everything. That's just the way I've found life to be for me. But everybody does their own thing. So I've always been open to everything. And the other thing is having Dave as a friend. People have this misconception when it comes to Satanism and what Satanism is. And 95% of what, the average person thinks of when it comes to Satanism is about as far away from Satanism as reality could possibly be. So I love being on here. I feel honored to be the first non-Satanist on the podcast. And, but the other thing is too, is I'm open to everything. And, for me, people are people. And like I said, as long as you're not doing horrible things to people or animals, then, cool. I'm open to everything. So yeah, I mean, that's me. I'm one of those people that's a very open person. I've never been closed-minded. My mother was one of those. I was raised always being told, fuck what everyone else says, fuck what the world does, do your own thing. I always, when I would do my back to school shopping when I was in high school, I would literally, instead of, going to all the malls and stuff back in the 80s, I would literally, go to the thrift store on Thursday when they had 50-cent all you could fit in a garbage bag. And I would just get all these old men pants and jackets and cut everything up. And that was me. I never gave a shit about, what people thought about how I looked. And thankfully, the one thing my mom taught me was, be yourself regardless of what anybody else fucking thinks. As long as you're not hurting people, just be you. And, I stand by that. I love it. When I see other people doing it, I appreciate the world so much better.
You have a lot of satanic tendencies anyway. And I find that's interesting because a lot of people do. And when you call them on it or you tell them, hey, yep, you're a lot like me, they get all backed up about it. Like, oh, no, that's not it. Because they've been spoon-fed this crap for so long that,
yep,
they believe that this is a bad thing. And of course, this is one of the reasons that our founder, Anton LaVey, used the S word. It was to keep the masses away. So sure. I love talking to people like you who see us for what we are and see through it for what it really is. It's great. Going back to your bands for a second.
Sure.
You grew up in the hotbed, the birth of death metal in Florida.
Yeah,
but we're talking right now, and you're in Germany. That's a pretty big move to make. So how did you go from Florida to end up in Berlin, of all places?
Well, okay, so I'm actually just outside of Nuremberg. I'm in the Berlin time zone, but I'm just outside of Nuremberg, way south, down in Bavaria. So I kind of got here by happenstance. I had some problems when I was in my late teens, early 20s, had some addiction problems, and grew up very white trash with a family that didn't have a lot of money. And I didn't know how I was going to clean myself up. So I basically saw the army as a way of kind of, getting myself straight, getting myself cleaned up and it not costing me anything. And hey, they were going to pay me and they were going to teach me a trade. So I joined the army, and then Bosnia happened in '94. And I was a combat engineer, played with explosives, landmines. And they needed combat engineers over here in Bosnia because basically Bosnia was had the second most landmines outside of Laos and Cambodia, which I think is the same place now in the world. So kind of got over here that way. And then when I got here, I fell in love with Germany. I always say I love Europe. I mean, Germany is my home, but Europe is just amazing. And from where I live in Germany, I'm literally like a 6 to 8 hour car ride away from anything. In 8 hours, you're in Paris. In 3 hours from me, you're in Prague. I can be to Scandinavia, anywhere in Scandinavia in less than 12 hours or around 12 hours. I can go down to Italy. I can be in Venice in about a 7 hour drive. So from where I'm at, you can basically drive anywhere in Europe in an easy day's drive. And the other thing is too, is I grew up in Florida. And yeah, I grew up in an area where people just basically didn't leave. Most of the people that I went to high school with are still doing the same things, still working the same jobs they did in high school. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get out and see the world. And once I got over here, I knew there was absolutely no going back. So I just kind of stayed and found home. And now I can't imagine living anywhere else in the world. That's for sure.
I'm envious because you drive 12 hours, you're in another country. I drive 12 hours, I'm still 12 hours closer to home than you are, which is awful. I got to get out more, I think, is where I'm coming from there. But now you're established, you're working there, everything's great. You seem very happy, very well adjusted. So people listening to you would probably be surprised to hear this dude's got a lot of mental health issues. And you've talked about it on your other shows, and you've come a long way in dealing with your mental health issues. Would you care to, discuss some of your mental health issues here with us? And again, you've come a long way in dealing with them, but you mentioned that you still slip from time to time. I'm just wondering what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so I do, my Pete Bean Pete podcast kind of was one of those things that happened because a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of my friends were like, hey, you know what? You got mental health issues and you talk about them. There are people that can talk about their mental health issues and people that can't. And I was always one of those people that could. I deal with panic. I deal with anxiety. I have PTSD. I did a tour through Iraq as a civilian contractor in 2003, which fucked me up mentally pretty good. My mother had mental health issues. As science is looking into things and we're looking at genetics, a lot of mental health issues are believed now to possibly be genetic. You can be passed down some of these mental health issues. Obviously not PTSD, but stuff like depression, anxiety, and those kind of things can be genetic. So in my younger years, I didn't have mental health issues, at least that I knew of. I probably did, but I just was young and dumb and didn't have a clue in the world what was happening to me. But as I got older and as things started to change, I started realizing that something wasn't right. And in 2014, I was at work one day and I thought I was having a heart attack. And they called the ambulance. The ambulance took me to the German hospital. And I was convinced I was having a heart attack. It's the big one, wheezy. Here we go for the Sanford and Son people.
Coming, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So, I didn't realize what was happening to me. And the doctor came in and he said, you didn't have a heart attack, but what you had was a panic attack. And I'm like, what the fuck is a panic attack? And then he explained it to me. And then I started doing research myself and I started looking into it. And as time went on, they started happening to me more and more. And as time went on from there, I did research because my thing is this: in Germany, like a lot of places in the world, their way of fixing mental health is you just stick you on drugs, pharmaceuticals. And I tried antidepressants and I went through 5 different ones and it was just the absolute worst thing in the world for me. Hated it. My last bout with antidepressants, I literally woke up one day and decided I wanted to rip off all the flesh off my bones. That was pretty uncool. And, when you read the side effects of most antidepressants, one of the biggest side effects on there is suicidal tendencies or thoughts. And you're like, holy shit. So we're giving people these pharmaceuticals that are supposed to stop them and supposed, from having these thoughts and, being mentally unstable, but we're going to give them these pills that could possibly cause them to, commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts. So I realized at that point, medicine's not going to fix me. I got to find something else. And I started reading and I started looking into things and I started doing research and it sucked. I dealt with panic attacks to the point that I was living on my own. And I would literally be in the corner of my room at like 2 o'clock in the morning, shaking, just basically wanting to die. The panic attacks were so bad. I just didn't want to live anymore. And then, so I should say this, there are different versions or different kinds of panic attacks. What I have is like literally scientists think around 1% of people actually have the severity of panic attacks. I do. An average panic attack will last you normally 15 to 20 minutes. Doctors will tell you a 45-minute panic attack is a long one. My panic attacks have lasted as long as 2 hours. And that's absolutely brutal, because if people don't know, when you're having a panic attack, your body goes into flight or fight mode. And it's something that, we've had since the Neanderthal days. And what it does is it takes all the blood out of your extremities and pushes it into your body. So when the saber-toothed tiger comes and rips off your freaking arm, blood's not squirting out as much as it would be. But the downside of that is you get cold, you start shivering, and it's absolutely brutal. And after a 2-hour bout with something like that, you just sleep. You're exhausted. You feel like you've run a marathon. After I found a book that was called the Anxiety Answer Book, and I just started reading. And it basically broke down a panic attack, every single step, why this is happening, why that's happening, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And every time I started having the panic attacks after that, I'd pick up my book and I'd just start reading. It'd be like, okay, this is happening to me. It's okay. I'm not going to die. Because when you're having them, you have this sensation that you're going to die. You're sure that the end is near. I was positive, fuck, this is it. I'm done. I'm having a heart attack. It's over every single time. Basically, it took a long time. It took a lot of learning. It took a lot of me teaching myself, hey, look, this isn't the end of the world. And, I've basically for the last 3 years, I would say, pretty much had them. I won't say you never have them under control, but when you understand what's happening to them, you can lessen the effects. And the more you understand, for me at least, the less potent they were. They weren't as strong as they used to be. And then I discovered, going over to Holland, I discovered THC gummy bears, which a lot of doctors and scientists have been experimenting with, THC, MDSC, these kind of drugs, basically helping people that have PTSD and severe anxiety and panic. And now if I start having something that I think, oh, fuck, this is going to be bad, I'll eat a THC gummy bear, and not to get stoned, because actually I don't like the feeling of getting stoned. I take it and it helps me come down. So I started basically looking into the other things that I could do to help myself. So now I'm at a point where I can deal with them and I live a normal life now. And actually, in the last 5 weeks, I've really started making huge steps forward by doing something that I used to do at a previous point in my life, which is I went back to being a vegetarian, which I was for almost 20 years of my life. And I started doing intermittent fasting, because that's another thing I should say is that I dealt with body image issues. I used to be this super, super thin kid in the 80s, and all of a sudden, as we get older, I started getting bigger and started putting on more weight. It probably wouldn't have bothered me had I not been the super thin, tiny kid growing up, or had freaking, pelvic bones sticking out. And so about 6 weeks ago, I saw myself in the mirror. I'm like, no, it's time to do something. I don't feel comfortable anymore with this. So I went back to being a vegetarian. I started doing intermittent fasting again. I started doing walking. And in the last 5 weeks, I've dropped 12 kilos. And the funny thing is, it was a friend of mine that was like, a buddy that knew me from when I was a vegetarian. He said, you used to be so much happier when you were a vegetarian. You looked better, you felt better. It was just one of those things that it never, ever, ever occurred to me till now. And I thought, fuck, man, I could have been doing this so long ago. But since then, it's really like a light bulb kind of went off in my head, and I feel a million times better. Is this the cure to my mental health issues? No, 100% not. Are they going to come again? Yes. There's no question about that. There is no cure. And I've said this on my podcast. Everybody looks for a cure or a magic pill or something that's going to make your mental health issues go away. And it's just never going to happen. The only thing any of us can really do is hope to lessen the issues we have. So by me taking away my body image issues and, kind of working on myself a little bit, I hope that it'll help with the rest. And till now it has. But mental health is really one of those things that's kind of, it's an up and down thing. You have your good days, you have your bad days. And some of us go through bigger swings. We have good months and bad months. So at the moment, I feel great. At the moment, I love doing my podcast because that's the other thing. Doing my podcast was the first step. I never thought that just speaking into a microphone would be kind of therapeutic for myself and other people. I mean, I get emails from people all over the world telling me how listening to my mental health podcast has helped them and how they felt like they were alone. And, listening to me talk about my issues made them realize that they weren't. And I mean, that's just something I never expected. And I'm not a big one to believe in destiny or anything like that. But, a lot of people, including, Dave himself, has said, sometimes things just happen for a reason and you were meant to do this podcast. And, I'm helping people. That's something I never thought I would be doing, but I've embraced it now and I love it. And if me talking into a microphone is going to help other people feel a little bit better, then fuck it. That's what I'm going to keep doing. And I absolutely love doing it. And it's the greatest thing in the world to me. And I'm having so much fun doing it. So, and by doing that, I get to come on, podcasts like this and talk about all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much my issues with mental health. Sorry if that was kind of long-winded.
No, that's fine. This is why I asked you here, because I don't know anybody that has had these issues, and especially don't know anybody that's willing to discuss them to the magnitude that you do. Now,
Right.
what I find especially interesting about this is we're a couple old farts, right? Given your other podcast, and we talked about this.
Yes.
Now, you knew there was something wrong with you. How much
Yes.
of that Gen X attitude came in your head and said, I got to get my head out of my ass here. There's nothing wrong with me. In my essay, I wrote at the top, we were little kids. We were insensitive assholes about this. Mental illness was funny, right? It was a joke. It was, oh, that
Yeah.
guy's nuts. He's going to the nut house. It wasn't a thing. So how did you come to grips with your own? How did you get past that Gen X programming that we all seem to have through no fault of our own? But we all seem to have that Gen X programming to say, oh, come on, put your big boy pants on. Stop being depressed. Get your head out of your ass.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll tell you what it was. It was a lot of my veteran friends. And I know this is going to sound really strange to a lot of people, but post Iraq and Afghanistan, the veterans and soldiers kind of took a different look at mental health because you saw guys, I mean, some of the toughest guys I know, guys that work on, SF teams, the baddest of the bad, these guys were coming home fucked up mentally. These guys were coming home alcoholics. These guys were coming home committing suicide. These guys were coming home not only committing suicide, but taking out their families with them. We kind of all started looking around going, fuck, man, we only have each other, and it's that whole mentality of, take care of your battle buddy. It kind of started with that. It kind of started with some of my veteran buddies, reaching out, and we still do. I've got two buddies that we talk daily. We start out the morning, hey man, how you doing today? Is everything good? How you feeling? I've lost so many friends to suicide that were veterans that had that exact attitude, or the society put that attitude on them, which is, oh fuck, man, you're a soldier, you're the baddest of bad. You can't have mental health issues. You can't, you can't talk about this stuff. You talk about this stuff, you're a fucking pussy. But that's the farthest from the truth. I've had guys come on my podcast. Dave's come on my mental health podcast and has talked about, his issues, what he went through, being suicidal. It's something that's changing, thankfully. And it's something that needs to change even more, especially from men. Like you said, when we were kids, rub some sand on, rub some dirt on, it'll be okay. Don't talk about mental health. It's not good to cry. You can't, as a man, you can't cry. I've done a podcast of me basically having a panic attack. I was in the middle of having a panic attack. I'm like, well, fuck, this is the perfect opportunity to let people hear what this sounds like. So I ran upstairs, pressed play on everything, and I had a panic attack, and I was crying on the episode and everything. And I'm one of those people. My mother was a firm believer is, people are people and you got to be yourself regardless. If that means that you cry, then you cry. If that means you're mad, then be mad. The more you hold stuff inside, the worse it is for you. And like I said, I guess the answer to the question is basically, it was the veteran community post Iraq and Afghanistan that kind of realized we're losing each other. We're losing so many buddies, and fuck this. Let's talk about it and let's help each other. because, the government's not going to be there to help us. The Veterans Administration's not going to be there to help us. Real short. I had a friend who I've talked about on the podcast, who was a songwriting partner of mine, went back to the States, went to VA, complained about having headaches, all kinds of stuff, and went into the emergency room. And first of all, they sent him away a couple times, went back to the emergency room. They found basically a softball-sized tumor in his head, and they diagnosed him as being manic depressive and all this other shit. And he died like a day later after the VA had turned him away twice. So, those are the perfect examples of why we as veterans kind of have to band together and take care of each other. And if that means, making a phone call, reach out to a buddy, reach out to someone, once or twice a week. Hey man, everything being good. I haven't heard from you. You down, and the other thing is too, look, me and Dave tell each other, that we love each other. You know what? There's nothing wrong with that. As men, to get out there and show emotions towards each other, people just have to grow up and realize that, it's a different world. It's okay to have emotions. It's okay that, people mean something more than just these superficial kind of relationships. And I'm not saying, if you barely know someone, it's one thing, but if you have friends and stuff, reach out, talk to them, because every life matters. Regardless of anything, every life matters. You got to talk about it. And you got to be open about it. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I guess.
One of the ways that I kind of like to deal with my stuff is to take that energy that I have, if I'm able to do so, and to focus it into something else, something else to be more creative or something to produce. And as a songwriter and a lyricist, does anything from your mental health issues, does that come through your songwriting? Would that be therapeutic, cathartic?
I don't, you know what? I don't think so. I mean, so the Ghost Market album, the lyrics to that album were actually written when I was in high school. The entire lyrics that I sing on that album were written when I was in high school, when the first girl broke my heart. A little gothic girl named Ashley Toman broke my heart, to which then spawned lyrics like, your love is like razors on my veins, love is murderous and insane. All this stuff that comes from this, teenage angst, you've just been dumped, your heart's been broken and ripped out of your fucking body. And yeah, no, mental health wise, not from now, but from, I'm a good one for using stuff that happened to me earlier in life, because, a lot of times those things that happen to us, that first time someone breaks your heart, that stays with you forever. And depending on how serious it is, sometimes, you're able to pull from that. So mental health wise, not really. Teenage heartbreak. Yeah, I'm all about writing about that.
Well, it's good that you're able to focus that energy, right? No matter where it comes from, inspiration comes from all kinds of places. I always like to say my wife will never forget the Christmas that I got her a mop, but that's another show.
Awesome.
So you've managed to deal with your own mental health issues. You recognize it yourself. You've found ways to deal with it. For anybody listening out there, are there any red flags or warning signs you could pass along regarding someone's mental health? And at what point do you think somebody should go seek help for their issues?
I've been accused of it, which is very true. Sometimes I downplay having panic attacks, because one of the first things I did when I was having panic attacks is, obviously it feels like you're having a heart attack. And it's some odd statistic, like 60% of all people in America, when they go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack, are actually having panic attacks. First of all, it's like this. If you're having something like that, seek medical assistance first. Go get help. You know what I mean? Don't be a Pete and be like, now I can do it because I've been checked out. I know what my EKGs are. I know that I'm fine. I know my heart is fine. So I know now that when I'm having these things, I'm having panic attacks. These are serious things because of the fact that it is the same exact symptoms of having a heart attack. So if you're having these symptoms for the first time and you haven't been diagnosed with panic, please go, don't be like, oh, well, Pete said on his podcast, no, that's a bad idea. Pete is not a doctor. I can't diagnose you. But seriously, get yourself checked out. As far as red flags go, that's really hard for me, because I'm one of those people, and I talk about it on the podcast. Most people that don't listen to my podcast wouldn't realize that I suffer from mental health issues, because I'm gregarious, I'm outgoing. That's kind of my way of hiding my mental health. This is another thing. I hate being around large groups of people, but anyone that knows me and knows I've done tour managing in the last couple of years, I've got up on stage in front of, 16, 17,000 people and I can sing. which is something normally someone that can't stand in the crowd can't do, but I can. So I'm kind of an oxymoron when it comes to a lot of the normal symptoms and signs when it comes to that. But look, if someone's feeling down, if they're feeling sad, if you see someone's withdrawing and not doing the things they normally do, and you see someone has lost that lust for life, and let's say someone loves hanging out and going to whatever bar with you and doing karaoke, and all of a sudden you don't see them there for a couple of weeks, and karaoke was something they really like to do, call and check on them. I always say it's better to check on someone and it not be needed than to check on someone and it be needed. You know what I mean? That it was too late, or fuck, I should have called them. I should have, you never want to have that feeling. But really, if someone is looking withdrawn, if someone's looking sad, just ask them how their day is going. That's the thing. A lot of times in this world of social media and computers and all this stuff and cell phones, we get all wrapped up in our own lives that we forget the people around us. We forget that the people around us are having emotions, that they're also in our world. Sometimes it's as easy as, put down your freaking cell phone and just say hello to someone, talk to someone, say good morning. You never know when, saying good morning to someone could change their entire day, So as far as red flags go, the easiest thing is if you see someone that's withdrawn and that kind of stuff, then check on them, ask them how they're doing, that kind of stuff. If you see people cutting, I know that's a big thing, or it used to be a big thing, people that are cutters and stuff, regardless of what you think about it, regardless if you think, yeah, okay, fine, they're doing it for attention. Well, cool. You know what? Maybe give them a little bit of attention. It's very hard when it comes to that. But if you think someone needs help, ask them, talk to them, and just talk to people. We've forgotten as a society how to communicate with people. Everything now is, send a text, write a message, send a direct message. People have forgotten the art of communication, and it's so much more personable, and it means so much if you can hear someone's voice, because then you can hear if they're upset. You can hear if they're not having a good day. So I guess, yeah, that's my thing. If someone's withdrawn, check on them, look at them, and always seek help. If they don't want to seek help, then seek help for them, because, it's you never want it to go too far.
And we both know from the business that we're both in, it's far better to be proactive than reactive. And how many times have you heard so-and-so passed away? And what are you talking about? I was talking to that guy last Tuesday. What are you talking about? And it comes out of nowhere, right? So being tuned in and switched on to, we call it situational awareness, right? To have that essay on things around you and the people that you're interacting with. And I love that you talk about the art of having a conversation, because it is an art that is going away.
Oh, yes.
And I think we all need to practice that a little bit more. So I cannot thank you enough for all of this input. I'm still processing, which is why I haven't said much, which is really unusual for me. But when it comes to Pete, anything else that he wants us to know about today's discussion? I would love to know about your other podcasts. Where can we find them? Where can we find your bands? Any projects you got in the pipe? Let us have it.
Okay, so as far as music goes, that's going to be, you're gonna have to track that stuff down, because Rupture went away in 1992. That was kind of my last calling card to the world of metal. So it's out there on YouTube. So if you just put in Rupture demo, you'll see there's an Australian band also called Rupture, and then you'll see like one link to someone has it up there. Or if you happen to be over in, Eastern Europe, you can do what I did, which have to buy my own freaking demo on vinyl as a bootleg, which was a rather strange experience when you're walking through a death metal festival. And, we always kind of joke, and we walk around and we see, who's got the most bootleg stuff. And obviously, my buddy Cam, who sings for Massacre, who was also in the original version of Death and pre-Death being Mantis, he always has the most. But we happened to be diving through records one day, and he jokingly held up a vinyl, and I look over there, and it's our Rupture demo on vinyl, and I'm like, fuck me. And so there's a Russian company that actually put it out on vinyl. So if you happen to be in the Eastern Europe, you can find it on vinyl. Anywhere else in the world, look it up on YouTube. Model Chaos, the Ghost Market album. That's the only one I sing on. It's out there on all the streaming platforms. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, all that kind of stuff. It's out there. It's all on YouTube too. Podcasts. So I've got my mental health podcast, which is Pete Being Pete, which is available on all streaming platforms except YouTube. I don't do YouTube. I don't do video content. And then you have me and Dave doing our stuff together, which is Old Men Howling. That's HWOLIN, Southern version, no chi in there, at the Moon. And that's also on all streaming platforms, Instagram, all that stuff. And other than that, if you happen to be over here in Europe and you see Benediction playing at a festival, or you see Massacre playing at a festival, you'll usually see me in tow somewhere, or you'll see me up on stage, guest singing on songs from time to time. And I'm out there on Instagram. Oh yeah, and all that stuff's on Instagram. So Pete Being Pete has an Instagram account. Old Men Howling at the Moon has an Instagram account. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do Facebook. I hate Facebook. Dave runs the Facebook side of Old Men Howling at the Moon. Pete Being Pete doesn't have a Facebook. I hate social media. I do it only for the fact that you can't do a podcast without social media. And it's brutal. I hate it. Social media to me is the absolute ball and chain. It's the albatross around my neck. It's just the worst. Other than that, look, if I can impart one thing on anyone listening to this podcast, just be yourself. It's so easy to be a follower, but it's so much easier to just be yourself. Find out who you are, be yourself, love yourself, do something good for yourself. If you're suffering from mental health, either get help or start working on yourself. It's not a dead end. My latest episode that just dropped today for Pete Being Pete, the title is, What Are You Doing for Yourself? And that's really a thing, sometimes when you get stuck in your mental health issues, you wait for someone else to fix you. And the truth is, you have to start fixing yourself first before someone else can fix you. So really, if you have any mental health issues, work on yourself, get help if you need help, talk to someone, reach out to me, on my Instagram or wherever, send me an email, and just, be good to each other. The world is shitty enough, reach out to someone, say hello, make someone's day better, and, just talk to somebody. And I appreciate you having me on. This is fun. It's nice coming onto other people's podcasts and kind of being able to, spread the word of, mental health and, talk about, the things that people, I guess people aren't used to men talking about. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. It's meant the world to me to come on the show and be able to talk about this.
I can't thank you enough for being here today, Pete. I so appreciate it. And with that, I know there's a big time difference between here and Germany. So I'll let you go and maybe take a dump or get some sleep or all that other normal human stuff you don't seem to have any time for, if that's all right with you. But
yes,
I would love to do this again sometime. Maybe we can have you and Dave on our show and we can all bitch about how much better shit used to be when we were kids, huh?
Oh yes, we will definitely set that up. I think getting you and Dave in the same area together would be awesome. Maybe we'll open the black hole to Satan himself with you two on.
Sounds good, my friend. We will talk to you soon. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and a huge thank you to Crusty Pete for being here today. If you have any questions or comments for him, message him at PeteBeingPetePodcast@gmail.com and check out his Instagram at Crusty_Pete_Germany. Also, check out his other podcasts, Pete Being Pete and Old Men Howling at the Moon. Please drop a like or a comment down below. For questions or comments, you can email me directly at information@neutralwisdom.ca. Like and a follow or sub really help to grow this podcast. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Check me out on Facebook under Robert Shirley, and check out Instagram at neutral_wisdom. And be sure to visit the website at neutralwisdom.ca. Until next time, ever forward.
You have been listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For more information, email us at information.neutralwisdom.ca, Facebook under Robert Shirley, or Instagram at neutral_wisdom. Also check out our website at neutralwisdom.ca. Program copyrighted 2025. Devilish Gentleman Enterprises.